I delivered pizzas for a nearby diner when I was 18 years old. I had been doing it for a few months at that point, and had already made a lot of deliveries. The first car I owned was a cheap old Ford that was great for driving around town. It was either Friday or Saturday night, and I was on the shift that closed at 12:30 a.m. because the restaurant was open later on weekends. It was almost midnight, and for sure after 11:30. Let's call my boss Richard. He always gave me the names and items that the customers had ordered for the deliveries. In a strange turn of events, that night we had a delivery for a single pizza going to a woman named Katie. The place we were going was farther away than usual, a 10-minute drive away. Much of the time, deliveries happen much more quickly, often in 5 minutes or less. I thought I'd get a bigger tip because I was farther away. I took the pizza to my car and got on the road, which is where I usually listen to music. I parked in front of the house when I got to the street where the address was written down. It was a small house like most of the others in that area, which looked like it was a low-income area. One of the rooms on the first floor had its lights on, I saw. "Excuse me, that pizza is for us," a woman called out from the window of the next-door house as I walked up to the front door. The address we gave was wrong. I then went to the next house. When I saw that the button wasn't working, I opened the storm door and slammed on the main door. After about 15 seconds, no one answered, so I knocked again. After that, I heard a woman inside yell, "1 second!" Still, no one opened up for a long time. There was silence for about 60 seconds before the door finally creaked open. A woman in her mid-50s stood there. She smiled big at me right away and looked me over from head to toe in a flirty way, like she was checking me out. "Charles, come look at how good-looking the delivery guy is," she yelled. The same thing was done by a second woman, who also looked to be in her 50s. I was getting red in the face right away because I always felt a little nervous around older women like that. I thought the first woman was Katie because she asked me what time my shift was ending. I was really nervous at that point because I wasn't sure of myself when I flirted with women back then. One of them then asked if I'd like to come in and have a beer with them. I told them, "This is probably my last run." I was afraid that my friends would never forgive me if I turned down this offer, so I said, "Yeah, sure." I told them I was 22 years old when they asked. They both laughed, and one of them told me it didn't matter if I wasn't 22. I did what they said and sat down on the couch. They sat next to me on both sides. The whole thing seemed completely unreal. I had never had anything even remotely like this happen to me before. It seemed like both of these women were already pretty drunk to me. As soon as that happened, they started flirting with me freely, telling me my dimples were cute and other cute things. I tried to hide how bad the beer tasted by taking small sips of it, since I didn't usually drink beer at that time. Then one of the women, Sarah, told me they had something to show me in the garage. "What is it?" I asked with a laugh. "It's a secret. You'll like it," they both said with a laugh. They made me go first. I couldn't help but make up my own story about what I thought was waiting in the garage. It was too bad that it didn't work out that way. I went to the door of the garage and looked down into the pitch-black space below. When I looked back at them, I saw that their faces were no longer showing any feeling. They started to smile and laugh again, only when they saw me looking. "What's down there?" I asked in a more serious voice. They both said, "It's a surprise," almost at the same time. As I carefully made my way down into the garage, I asked where the light switch was. "Turn off the lights," one of them said. Though I can't say for sure, I think I saw movement as I looked into the darkness. It looked like someone's hand or arm moving. I quickly turned around and saw the two women moving in a strange and sneaky way toward the door. I quickly shut the door behind me as I stepped back out of the garage. As I pushed past them to get closer to the front door, I tried to stay cool and said I still needed to be paid for the pizza. At that moment, I saw a big man standing still in the opening of a nearby room, most likely the kitchen. The next thing he said has stuck with me ever since. "Let's just make this easy," he said in a calm voice. I turned around right away and told them, "Don't worry about the pizza, it's free." I ran to the front door, opened it by pulling it open, and then slammed it shut again, but I heard it open again a short time later. I jumped into my car and locked the doors as soon as I got inside. The man was already looking in through the passenger window. At first he tried the handle, then he hit the glass. I sped off, putting the car in drive and never looked back. As soon as I got back to the restaurant, I told my boss what had happened and why I had come back without getting paid. Everyone there was shocked, including him. I called the police non-emergency line to make a report in the end, just in case that address was linked to more crimes in the future. That way, the police would have proof that there was something very wrong at that house. However they set up the trap that night, I'm so thankful I never found out what it was. I still worked at a pizza place when I was 20 to help pay for things like gas and food. The job was always pretty simple. Take the order, pack the food when it's ready, put it in a paper bag, and drive it to the place that was given. It was always the same process, and I had done this a million times before. Nothing strange ever happened. Depending on how far the delivery was, tips were usually between $3 and $5, but sometimes customers were so kind that they would leave $10 or even more. It was just a chicken parm hero and a plain slice of pizza that day. That kind of small order generally meant smaller tips, but I couldn't pick which deliveries I did. As I drove to the house, I noticed that it was in an area of the neighborhood that looked like it had been abandoned. The feel of that block was more country than the rest of the area. One house had a trailer parked on the yard, next to a small wooded area. The other houses looked like simple farmhouses. The street was less densely packed with buildings than the blocks around it. When I got there, I saw a small house with a big yard that was shaped in a strange way. It was next to what looked like an empty house, and tall grass and thick trees covered the whole area. About 7 p.m., the sky was getting darker, which is when most people turn on their lights inside the house. But this house didn't have any lights on, and the front door looked like it was slightly open. As I walked toward the front door, I heard a violin playing. I think it came from a few rooms away, but the walls, or maybe a door, blocked it out. The doorbell didn't work after a few minutes of being pushed and knocked on the door many times. The violin played on. Because I didn't feel safe walking inside, I went around the property to the back. Things were all over the grass in the backyard, which was a complete mess. I even saw an old broken chain-link fence in the middle of the yard. It was loud when I knocked on the back door. When I looked through the glass, all I could see was what looked like a very crowded storm room. It was clear that these people were not very clean. When there was no answer at the back door either, I went back to the front and called a co-worker at the restaurant to make sure the address was correct. He checked his notes for a moment and then told me I was in the right place. I then went back to the front door and pushed it open. The creepy violin music didn't stop. "Pizza's here," I yelled. Someone yelled back, "Over here," and the violin stopped for a moment. The violin then began playing again. They were playing a simple but disturbing tune over and over again, as if it were stuck on repeat. Inside, there were still no lights on, so it was hard to see anything. I walked straight toward where the music was coming from. The air inside the house smelled musty and was not comfortable. As I got about halfway through what you could call the foyer, I started to feel really uneasy and chose not to go any further. "Sir?" I called to them from the front door. This time the music stopped all the way, leaving only quiet. I stayed near the door, closer to the outside, because I thought I might hear footsteps coming toward me, but there was nothing. It was dead quiet. I asked again, "Sir?" and heard someone from another room say, "Yes, sorry, I have trouble walking. Please bring it in here." He told me, "If you just walk through the living room, I'm in the dining room," when I asked him what room he was in. Nothing had been said over the phone about any of this, so it all seemed very strange. I took a moment to plan what to do next. I felt bad leaving because I thought this man might be old and weak and living in a messy house. As I moved through the living room, I came across a doorway that I thought went to the dining room. I didn't walk right in because I was too careful and scared. Instead, I peered around the wall with one eye to see what was inside. The fiddle was there, but no one was playing it. There was no one else in the room either. That was it. I quickly and quietly went back to the front door, shut it, and drove back to the pizza place. I told them I had a bad feeling about them. Even though the claimed customer never called back to ask why I left, my boss totally got it. That said a lot. I, along with my boss and co-workers, never saw the point in trying to rob someone in their own home. When I got home from work that night, I looked up the address and saw that the house had been foreclosed on months before and was empty. Everyone was just as shocked as I was when I told them this. I really was only a few steps away from being robbed or having a bad joke played on a pizza delivery guy who didn't know what was going on. It was my last week working at an Italian restaurant that served both pizza and traditional Italian food. During different shifts, I had different duties. Some days I worked at the pizzeria as a cashier, other days I was a busboy in the restaurant, and still other days I made orders. Why did I like deliveries so much? Because I could get tips. In a strange way, my last day finished with a scary event during a delivery. It was late at night, which is often when bad things happen. We got an order for 4 specialty pizzas, which was a pretty big order, about $20 worth, and it was going to be brought to a rough part of town. This was a little red flag. I thought that because I drove an old Toyota, it wouldn't draw any unnecessary attention to itself in that neighborhood. There was at least a 20-minute drive, and when I got home I went up to the doorbell. Within seconds, the door opened halfway, letting a Hispanic guy in with a gun. He saw the pizzas and then opened the door all the way. I don't know much about guns, but I think it might have been a Colt 45. I wasn't paying close attention to what kind of gun it was. When I saw the gun and totally understood what was going on, my heart pretty much sank. Then, 2 more Hispanic men came in through the door and grabbed me while the first man held a gun to my head. The men were yelling at each other in Spanish. The man with the gun then spoke broken English and said, "Give me all your stuff." I replied with an almost inaudible, "Okay." I was so scared that I couldn't even breathe or speak. I gave him my wallet because that was all I could offer. Then he yelled, "Phone!" So I gave him my phone, a Samsung Razr, which was like an iPhone back in the day. One of the men even grabbed my wrist and ripped off my watch. Luckily, it wasn't a very expensive one. Then, one of them took my ID out of my wallet and read my address out loud. Then they made threats against me, saying that they would kill my whole family if I told anyone about what happened. I could feel myself wanting to scream for help and fight for my life, but I couldn't. Then they pushed me down the stairs and out of the house, where I injured myself badly and began to bleed. They slammed the door shut, leaving me with just my keys. I didn't go back to the pizza place because I was too upset and scared. I was very quiet and shaking when I got home. They knew right away something was wrong when they saw my bloody knees and scratched up shorts. I had to tell them the truth when they tried to get me to talk. I told them that I was robbed with a gun while making a delivery, that they had my address, and that they would kill us if I told anyone. Because my dad knew people in the police department, he called one of his close friends right away. They quickly checked the man's history and found that Pedri had been convicted of 4 felonies in the past. He was living in that house. Even though the gunman was a danger, my dad and his police contacts helped them surround the house with squad cars and enter it with guns drawn. I wasn't there, but my dad knew people who did, and they told us that 2 of the 3 guys were still inside and had been arrested and charged. The man with 4 convictions got life in jail, and one of the others got 5 years because they had been convicted before. The 3rd man wasn't in the house, and I don't think he was ever found. He could still be out there right now. Since then, I've woken up more than once to sounds outside when the windows are open. It could be footsteps on the side path to the garden or the gate opening and closing. Even though it could be my mind or my fear, I still worry about my family and I's safety. Now that enough time has passed, I think the man has either left the country or learned his lesson and will never come back to this town again. It's still something that stays in the back of my mind.